the last 40 years, I've seen enormous strides and insights into what's called behavioral psychology. And, Daniel Kahneman, Amos Tversky, Dan Ariely, and others have been the leaders in this. And that what they've shown is that humans, we're all humans, have biases. They're just built in. You can say they're good or bad, that's fine, but they're there, and they've been able to demonstrate them empirically and through experimentation. One of the biases is called anchoring. And anchoring means you get an idea in your head, could be a number or a concept or something, and just you anchor on it, and you begin to filter everything you see or hear through that one element, again, what's called the anchor. Now, when it comes to gold, very simple anchor is, gold's been going up, went from $2,000 to $3,000, then $3,000 to $4,000 per ounce. Now it's up to $5,000. And let's just say you have 50 ounces. So when it goes up $1,000, you made $50,000. If it goes up another $1,000, you made another $50,000. So people get anchored on those two things, the $1,000 jump. And again, if you have 50 ounces, you made $50,000. What they don't realize, at least not right away, is that each $1,000 increment is easier than the one before because you're working off a higher base. In other words, it's a smaller percentage gain. So when you go from 2,000 to 3,000, yeah, that's a 50% increase. That's a heavy lift. But when you go from 3,000 to 4,000, that's a 33% increase. Still a heavy lift, but it's less than the one before. Well, when you go from 9,000 to 10,000, that's only 11%. That's kind of like a good month the way gold's been going. So my point is, yeah, it's going to take a while to get to 6,000 and get close to 7,000, but it's going to go 8, 9, 10 really quickly, because those are much smaller percentage gains. And so that's really how professional traders think about it. So when you say 5 to 10 doubling, yeah, that's mathematically correct. But what actually happens is it goes 6, 7, 8, and at the end, it really gets momentum and goes to 10 in no time. So saying gold will go to 10,000 is kind of easy, and everyone's out there saying it. But when you explain it the way I just did through the behavioral psychology, it's going to happen, but my point is it's going to happen much faster than people realize. There's a reasonable chance that will happen. Your description is exactly right, Michelle, and they have been talking about it. And Trump is full of surprises, so it wouldn't surprise me to see them do that. But I think it's helpful for the viewers to understand the little bit of the background, what it means and what it doesn't mean, before people get kind of too spun up about it. So for this, you have to go all the way back to 1933. At that time, the Federal Reserve actually held most of the gold. It was owned by the Federal Reserve System, which is, of course, privately owned by the banks. FDR took the gold from the Fed and gave it to the U.S. Treasury. And you're right, today that 8,133 metric tons U.S. gold reserve is owned by the U.S. Treasury. Although I point out that people think it's all in Fort Knox. About half of it's in Fort Knox. The other half is in West Point. They're both Army forts. So I say, well, actually the Army has the gold, but it's on their property. But you're right. It's owned by the U.S. Treasury. Now, the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, U.S. Constitution, says that the government may not take private property for public use without providing proper compensation or just compensation. Okay, so when FDR took the gold from the Fed and gave it to the Treasury, that's from private to public, what did they give the Fed in the form of compensation? The answer is they gave them a piece of paper. It's called the gold certificate, and it's still on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. It's a public record. You can go to the Fed website, hunt around a little bit, find the balance sheet, and on the asset side, the first item is gold certificate. It's not gold. It's a piece of paper supposedly backed by gold, but it's what the Fed got in exchange for handing over the physical gold. And that is valued at $42.22 an ounce, which is, as you described. And then, of course, the Treasury carries the gold on their books at the same price. Now, could the Treasury revalue the price of gold to the current market, roughly $5,000 an ounce, or any value in between? The answer is they could, and it's been done before. This was actually done in the Eisenhower administration. Again, that's a little historical footnote, but not that many people know about it. But it's really just an accounting entry. What would happen is the Treasury would call the Fed and say, "Hey, Fed, that gold certificate you got, mark it up to the current market, so from roughly $42 an ounce to $5,000 an ounce. And now you've increased the balance sheet of the Fed. You've increased the value of their asset." Well, accounting 101, something has to happen on the liability side. If the asset goes up, either the liability or the capital goes up. Well, the answer is the Treasury has an account at the Fed. It's called the Treasury General Account. It's no different. You and I have bank accounts, and we put money in our bank accounts. Well, the Treasury has a bank account at the Fed, this Treasury General account. So when the Fed revalues the gold, the Fed would also have to credit the Treasury's account. All that money, that mark-to-market profit, would go into the Treasury's account. At today's prices, it's about $1 trillion. That's the amount of money that would just appear out of nowhere. But of course, that's what the Fed does. Now, it's when it was used before, when there's been some talk about using it again, it's when the U.S. hits these debt ceilings. Now, separate law puts a cap on the amount of Treasury securities that the Treasury can issue. You can issue up to this level, but no more. Well, Congress always raises it, and they just keep increasing the debt level. But every now and then, Congress wants to fight about it, and they don't raise the debt ceiling, and the Treasury hits it, and you can't issue any more debt. And then the theory is, well, now the Treasury can't pay their bills, because they can't issue any more debt. But technically true, there's some workarounds, but that's basically what happens. Well, without raising the debt ceiling, without issuing any more debt, if you did this accounting entry I just described, $1 trillion would appear out of nowhere in the Treasury's account, and they could spend $1 trillion. That would actually fund the government for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months at the current rate of expenditure without issuing new debt. And that's the point. And that's what happened in the Eisenhower administration in the 1950s. It was a little less dramatic. The Congress actually went home, and the Treasury Secretary forgot to get the debt increase before they went home. It was kind of an oversight. But they did exactly what we're talking about. The Treasury called the Fed and said, increase our gold account and put the money in, and we'll spend it till the Congress gets back. So the answer is, it's completely legal. It's not difficult to do. It has been done before, and money would come out of thin air and be available to the Treasury. And if you did to the current market price, it would be about $1 trillion. But here's the point, and I think this is important for the viewers. That doesn't do anything to the price of gold. Gold is a world commodity. It's traded on world markets. You have Shanghai, you have COMEX, you have the London Metals Exchange, London Bullion Market Association, ETFs. Gold is roughly $5,100 an ounce. It's been bouncing around a little bit, but let's just say over $5,000 an ounce. That's the price of gold. Having the Treasury and the Fed make some accounting entries would not change that price. It would still be about $5,000. So again, we're back to the psychology. And I think this is what you were referring to, Michelle. If the Treasury did that, if the Treasury and the Fed did what we've just been talking about, would it change the psychology? Would everyday Americans go, oh, wait a second, the price of gold just went up, 100 times? It might. Again, it's an accounting entry. It doesn't change the world market. It doesn't change the supply and demand. It doesn't change anything fundamental. But could there be a psychological spark that would say, hey, wait a second, the U.S. government all of a sudden is paying attention to gold. The U.S. government is treating gold as a monetary asset. I've told the Treasury for years, you ought to buy gold. Your Treasury is issuing all this debt, and they're, spending the money on who knows what, a lot of waste, obviously. Why doesn't the Treasury just issue debt and buy gold? And you get to keep the gold. So I think that, again, legally it's possible. Politically, it wouldn't surprise me to see the Trump administration do it. It's just an accounting entry. It would put a lot of money in the Treasury's bank account. Those are all important things by itself. It doesn't change the fundamentals in the world price of gold, but it could have a psychological effect. Well, higher is interesting. You could definitely value it lower. You could value it 1,000 or 2,000 or anywhere in between. Could you value it higher? The accountants might object. The thing is, if you market to market, what you can't object. Say, hey, that is the price of gold. Now, you could do it multiple times, and this kind of gets to your point. If you did it, let's just say $5,000 an ounce today, and then a year from now, gold is $10,000 an ounce, which is what we've been talking about, what I've been projecting. Could you do it again for another $5,000? The answer to that is yes. So there's not necessarily a cap, but it's not clear that I'm not sure the accountants would let the Fed market above the market. But if you say, could you do it 2 or 3 times and follow the market? The answer is yes. Gold is $42 an ounce. As I say, it's historic cost accounting if you want to be technical. But most countries, when they buy new gold, they put it in their reserves at either the price they paid, or they market to market, or they do both. So this is not a shocker to the rest of the world because it's what they already do. It's sort of common sense. So in a sense, the U.S. would just be catching up. But of course, the U.S. is the largest single holder of gold. If you ask me what the effect is, kind of psychologically, in terms of the popular media, again, it's just an accounting entry. It does put money in the Treasury's account. But what it does, it sends a signal to the American people and to the world that the U.S. cares about gold. And years ago, Ben Bernanke was asked in an interview, about gold, and why if gold's unimportant, why does the U.S. have 8,000 plus metric tons? And his answer was, he said it's a tradition. He dismissed it. Now, Bernanke's smarter than that. He knows there's a lot more to it, of course. But he was sort of like blowing off the question. It's just a tradition. It's just sitting around. And a lot of public officials have more or less said the same thing. There are very few people who take gold seriously as a monetary asset in the United States.